So a question I love asking my guests is what they were like growing up. So what was little August like?
You know, it's funny. I say sort of a lot of things when this has to be like a quick part of the conversation that I don't linger on, but my favorite one is a long time ago I was a boy on Disney Channel, and then now I am a girl who's real deep into synthesizers and AI, so
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah, a lot
it's
has
been a
changed
slow
over the years.
progression, yeah.
Yeah. Wait, what were you on Disney Channel?
I was on a show called Best Friends Whenever. I played a kid who invented time travel. And then it's so
cool.
funny too, because like if there were any kid on any Disney show, like in the show itself and like the fiction of the show, where I could watch and I would be like, that kid's gonna be a synthesizer head. Like watch that kid become 7 or 8 years older. They're gonna have walls of synthesizers.
Yeah.
Because it was like
That's
this
wild.
nerd who like works out of this science lab RV, it was a pretty cool set actually. I got a lot of cool just kind of like decorations memories from that.
So you were into that stuff even as a young tyke, and naturally that was like a part of you, but somehow you were able to still land a position, right? Acting position that was like related to what you were interested in, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely was a performer from the time I was really little. The way that my parents tell me that started is that I went downstairs and I watched Star Wars with my brother, and then I came upstairs and I was like, Mom, Dad, when Luke sees what happened to his house, him goes. And I did I just fully committed to being devastated Luke Skywalker. And my parents were like, maybe put you in an acting class because you're like 3.
Yeah, I think that's... Oh, man. Yeah. Can you believe I haven't seen one Star Wars movie? I know I'm ashamed to say it.
You know, I think everybody gets to have their thing that they just haven't seen.
Oh, yes.
For me, it's The Wizard of Oz. I never saw that, and then I feel like
okay.
I don't necessarily need to see The Wizard of Oz. Like,
I don't have to see it, right? It's like, it's okay. Yeah, that's true.
Exactly. I know what I
true.
like.
Although you actually do need to see Wizard of Oz, actually. You have to see
shit.
it.
Okay, well, you gotta tell me why.
Well, it's a classic. First and foremost, it's a classic movie. That can't be the only reason, because there's a lot of classics that I haven't seen. Why do you have to see Wizard of Oz? It's not the oldest movie ever made, but it kind of is. Like the way that I look at it, it's like the Wizard of Oz is like the first movie ever created. That's kind of what I feel
that
like.
because it's got
not
the
true.
beginning is black and white, and then it goes to color. But I remember reading that that's because they were shooting the movie, they shot the opening few scenes, and then color came out. Like color
Dang,
photography.
so it happened right at the intersection.
Exactly,
I had no idea.
and so they were like,
reason.
we're doing the rest of the movie like that. Let's
it's like
have
we
it
think it's like
cut
some
off
sort
in
of
Kansas.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. Wow.
It's
okay.
so funny
all right.
too,
Well,
because it ends up seeming like such a diss on Kansas. It seems like they're saying Kansas is black and white.
Sure, absolutely. It's like for centuries now, or for decades now, people from that area are just like, wait a second, they don't like that movie. They don't like Wizard of Oz. They're
No,
not
exactly.
fans. Yeah.
Well, it's funny too. Both of my parents are from Oklahoma, which I was born in Denver, but we sort of like Kansas. I'm familiar with as that place that I hear that name when we're visiting my grandparents, and we would like visit my grandparents' Oklahoma. We would drive through Kansas, and I remember that I don't know. I think I never even connected that was related to the thing for the Wizard of Oz. Like that. It was one of those things where you're a kid, you hear all these proper nouns, and you're just like compartmentalizing those somewhere. Where it's like hearing the name of like a company that like everyone knows. It's like, oh, I don't really think about how that's like two names. I think that's just like that company's called that.
Sure. That's just kind of the way.
You know what I mean?
For sure. Very cool. Okay. All right. So you did that for how many years were you on that show?
So that show went for 2 seasons, and then I did sort of a couple different shows just across like Hulu stuff, Netflix stuff for the next couple of years, and then eventually I started like putting together. This was as I was getting like really into music, and I think when I was on Disney, I saw there were these other actors on the network that would have these music releases, and I was like, this seems cool. This seems like something I want to do. And then I sort of would eventually put together that these kids, you know, these friends of mine often had a lot to say and often had, you know, really, really interesting creative energy to share. And nonetheless, because you're in that sort of Disney environment, a lot of times you get something that is, and I say this in sort of the less fun way, but engineered, like something that's almost constructed for the destination it will arrive at and the audience that it's supposed to arrive at, rather than, I think the kind of art that I'm really drawn to these days is art that exists for its own sake and then finds where it wants to go, finds who it wants to deliver to. I think that's, you know, when I look at the artists, actually during that time when I was starting to piece together, I was auditioning for all these boy roles, and I was like, why does none of this feel right? And then eventually I just hit this point where I realized that I never really consciously subscribed to boy. It was something that was definitely given to me and that definitely came with certain, you know, advantages and stuff growing up. And then the more I thought about it, the more I just disagreed with those, and the more I felt like these roles I was auditioning for, like they almost just felt like aliens. Like it just felt like at a certain point I was just like, I can't play any of these characters. And I also think that, you know, the definition that I've come to regarding, you know, my own self, my own gender, and you know what being a woman is to me, I think I just kind of realized that Hollywood's not quite there yet, and it's probably going to take a little while. They're just now starting to bring trans actors and actresses in on, you know, mainstream shows, and I think right now Hollywood's really interested in the type of trans where it's a little more comfortable. You know, there's more of an effort to make changes to our own selves to like fit in different things with that. And I think realizing that my definition of myself was so much its own thing, I think the music suddenly, it was just like a tidal wave over me. It was like suddenly that was where all of the speaking I had to do was somewhere that I could
a way for you to express
everything.
Yourself.
Exactly.
A way for you to express yourself in a
especially synthesis, like sounds made with synthesizers. I think there's such this this energy of self-defining, this energy of like, oh, this isn't the sound of a piano, this isn't a sample of a this is a sound which was created just to be here in this song right now. Like that is something that to me I think resonates with the level of being that I found when I started to release acting, move into music, and come to understand my gender. It was all sort of one big motion, because what it really felt like was my sort of the version of myself that I like to say is up there and sends me instructions once in a while. I think sent like a big batch all at once. It was like, you know, here's a big piece of yourself.
Yeah. Well, so let's unpack that a little bit. So synthesis and sound design, it sounds to me like, from the way that you just described that, like musically, and also I want to just make a point of something you said too about, you know, music finding the right person versus the engineered versus like, you know, forcefully maybe marketing it, or, you know, has like a different sort of reason why it was made. I love that. And I'm in a very similar space to what you just described, where I do a lot of different things, including what we're doing here, this platform, but music, I'm a math tutor. I have a, you know, thriving education business where I do online and in-person math and English and piano lessons. And so one of the things that I kind of realized lately, and I'm really enjoying this, is the time that I have, like an hour or 30 minutes or whatever time I have, I'm also a new father too, so I'm a lot of different hats, right? But the time that I have to like just create some music on my iPad or on my, piece of equipment behind me or wherever, there was a time where the creation of that music was trumped by the fact that I need to record content with me creating it, or I need to make this, and it needs to do something, or needs to be something, right? And now I'm kind of thinking through the lens of no. There needs to be dedicated time where there's no cameras on, right? It's just me and the music, and it's just creating just for fun. And maybe, or definitely, this is not even going to be shared with anyone. This is just for me in this moment. And I was just doing that yesterday at a cafe. After really not doing it for a long while, I've been spending a lot of time kind of just, I guess, grinding and just trying to like get things done and move, impervious barriers, or not barriers, what do you call, like boulders, together, like really trying.
Yeah. Putting together the context
how are
that
you
lets
you
have
that?
those moments. Like almost, the more you get, like it feels like the more you get those moments, especially when you're like starting out with new gear, or anytime you're learning really quick, it feels like those moments where, I could film this, or I could, they kind of jump out at you more. And I always tell my friend when we're working on tracks, my sort of catchphrase in the studio is, remember, all we're trying to do is lose track. All we're actually like trying to do is get distracted by the fun of the process, to the extent that by the time we go back and listen to it, we will have forgotten that was even something that we were gonna do. Like,
that's
sometimes
powerful,
I make
August.
music because I'm eagerly awaiting to hear some music. I want to hear new August music, and then sometimes what I want is, and this is where teenage engineering comes to mind especially, but sometimes what I want is to push the buttons and turn the knobs. And I find that when I engage with it from that angle, and I see what can I discover, I call it a submarine, because my definition of a submarine is where I sit when I'm exploring. And so I like to think, if I'm going to go exploring, if my goal is to sit at the controls and play, a lot of times I get work that I like so in this particular way, just because it didn't come into this world thinking it needed to be anything. It just came into this world to see what this world was. You know what I mean?
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yes. Okay. So you're kind of so yeah. You have different intents behind your music making sessions, whether it's just in a sense of discovery and the word you use, play. And I love what you said too about sometimes I literally click. I don't use this too much. I should probably be using it more often. But there's like a mark clip button on this platform, so when like special moments happen, I can just kind of come back to it. So something you just said that really jumped out at me is like the main. Well, I'll let you say it again, but about losing track. Can you say that once more? Because that was like really, really good.
I say this to the person who I think we co-mentored each other into being where we are with music, kind of just from being acting buddies. My friend Diego.
Okay.
We when we'll be in a session, he would tell you, this is like my catchphrase. I say it in any case, from when we're sequencing drums to when we're arranging the full track, all the way to when we're writing the vocals. My thing I always say is, the only thing that that's like a requirement, or that we're trying to do, is to lose track of goals, to lose track of time, to lose track of what the original idea was, because this new idea got our attention. Like, I love the idea of a vision. I love the idea of having something in your head that guides you as you move. But I also always tell my friends, make sure that you in your head that decided before, make sure that you doesn't talk over the you now who knows the moment and who might have a piece of intuition that couldn't have been predicted. And sometimes I see people cut down ideas in the moment just because it didn't match with an idea they had before. And I always like to say, you now is smarter. You now knows more, because whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes, you're further in. You've got that much more experience, that much more time to know this song in particular.
And that means something, for sure.
Absolutely.
When did you first? Yeah. When did you first get introduced to teenage engineering equipment? What was your first thing that you purchased?
This is a case where I gotta throw put you on the spot a little bit, because you were my intro. You were my.
Is that right? Really? Wow.
I was looking at the OB4 because I followed them on Instagram just because I'm a design head. I love really good. We were talking about play. I think play is one of the most reliable facilitators of creativity and of what I could even call some tangible, predictable brilliance in people. I think the reason we have children play is because they have no mechanism to keep secret that they are brilliant. And so when we let them play, they just spill the beans, and we see brilliance, and we see learning just in plain sight, like we see the way that a child touches a block when they're stacking it with other blocks. Like, you can immediately tell that kid's making a map of that block in their head, whether they know it or not. Like, they're doing just as much seeing with their tips of their fingers as they are with their eyes. Like, all of the sensory info in play, I think, always sort of jumps out extra when the design feels playful. And so I saw the OP1, like videos of it. I'm a huge fan of Bon Iver. That's an instrument that or a artist who has been very instrumental in my sort of self-definition. And I remember my favorite album, 22 Million, was made very heavily on an OP1. And I think I just kind of had this vibe that was like, eventually I see myself being one of the weirdos who has that thing. And then the OB4 came out, and I saw, teenage engineering, I feel like, gets so much flack every time they announce anything awesome because no one's done it before. Whatever they announce, no one's done it before. And so, like, people will always write articles and tweet things, but I think it takes usually some time for the zeitgeist to realize what the goal even was. Like, I feel like this happened so much with the OB4, and then I found your YouTube videos, and this was just somebody who very clearly understood what it was supposed to be. They understood that this is supposed to be a speaker that a passerby goes, "What is that?" Because that moment is the moment that you get to hold it out to them and let them wiggle the tape reel, and you go, just wiggle, see the spinning thing, just mess with that. And you are guaranteed to see a stranger smile. Like, that is a hard thing for me to pass up.
Yes.
I saw that energy just in, like, your remix videos, your little, like live stream stuff. And this was, like, early in the life of the OB4, too. And I got one of those, and then you know how it is when you get a teenage engineering thing where it's just like, oh, shit, these are going to start piling up.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. For sure. Yep.
Occasionally my bank account is going to yell at me.
Yeah, like, hang on. Slow down, August.
You really can't do that.
Right. You really shouldn't be doing this. You really, really shouldn't.
No, but, I mean, that's where it ties into, and this will be its own part of the conversation for sure, but I think that the reason I'm comfortable showing everybody these things and saying, hey, get interested in this, even though it's something that's expensive, is because I think that we are at the very beginning of a shift that's going to take a handful of years, but that I think is going to end in everybody being able to just buy the stuff they need. I think
Yeah.
this whole thing with jobs and AI, like, I think we're missing the fact that the opportunity is that everybody works as much as they want, full stop. And other than that, everyone's fine. Like, everybody, we have all the infrastructure and resources to take care of everybody, and to let everybody go, hey, this thing looked really cool, and I've learned a lot about myself since getting it, and that's all the reason I need. Like, I feel like if I can have that, if that joy can come to my doorstep, I'm sort of always scoping out how do we get that, how do we scale that up? And then I think the AI thing started happening, and me just being someone who makes visuals and music and just the art assets, I think I had this instant energy of like, oh, so the thing that is the hardest part of what I do, that is sort of the reason that, like, it's what I do, and sometimes people commission me for stuff, and sometimes, ultimately I get put in this role that I don't even want, which is gatekeeper. I'm keeping someone away from seeing their idea as a visual because I'm the one who has to render it. But in this perfect world I'm imagining, everybody would just have whatever picture they could describe. And then the last year happened, and, suddenly all these image generators, people do have whatever picture they can describe. And I think, for me, the angle of, oh, everybody's going to get to show their grandma the dream they had, that goes so far above anything that's like, people should be, keeping art away from other people and saying, well, pay me and then you can have this picture. Like, I think, just like with music, I am happier the more people know how fun this is. And I'm happier, it's hard to see someone like jamming on an OP1 for the first time and not be like, I wish I could just give this person this thing. In fact, one time, an AI coworker, a friend by the name of Manu, who does like human interface research, he was playing with the OB4. He noticed that the knob was not only motorized, which he had so much to say about a motorized knob, because this guy does haptic research, like his whole field of study is knobs and motors, and he sort of, I see him like playing with it, and then he turns around, he's got this like mind blown face, and he goes, sometimes the knob clicks. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, sometimes it's smooth. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I've never seen anything like that. And it's like his field, and I was like,
yeah,
I gotta send this guy home with the open. I can't.
Yeah,
that was the one time I lost a piece of gear because I just had to give it to someone.
Wow. Dude, man, I have so many thoughts, man. I think what you just described, even with the OB4, it is such a fun piece of equipment to use. I had no idea that my content is what kind of introduced you to
brought
that,
me
which
to the
is very,
brand.
very
No,
exciting
absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. And even with this platform here, the show here is called Khordmaster Keys, and maybe now this is probably like I would say anywhere between 12th to 15th episode that is like this sort of potential spin-off of Teenage Engineering Talk. It's a thought that I had for a while. I love these products so much. I love using them, and almost as much as I enjoy using them, I love talking to people who also enjoy using them, and we're going to get into this next, but like learning how they use the equipment, and especially when how they use it is different than the next person, right? Maybe it's
like a
something
guitar
unique, like with me with the
in
OB4.
It's like
Do
no
tell.
two
You said like a guitar.
guitarists. No two guitarists are going to use a guitar the same way, because a guitar is so much more than one technique. It is like a guitar is. One of my favorite things to say is a guitar is what I would call a perfect synthesizer. It's got the input built in. It's got the speaker built in. It's got the interface is learnable, but also, you can really have a lot of wiggle room with it. But beyond all that, it doesn't need batteries and it doesn't need power. And nonetheless, you're synthesizing notes, you know, like you are telling the guitar what type of voice to use, and the limits of any synthesizer will guide the creative process with it, I think, and I think that's a good thing. And Teenage Engineering really knows that. And I think they are really great at going, hey, here's all these boring settings on a synthesizer. You're literally not allowed to see or touch those. Here's 4 knobs, and each of them is hilariously fun. And, you know, the expression kind of jumps to the forefront. I feel like a lot of synthesizers are doing this game where they try to have the most settings. And I almost want to see a synthesizer that learns more from the guitar and says, what if I did really not a lot of settings, but those settings were just bendy enough that people would find new ways to play this for hundreds of years. I remember reading an article that said the OP1 is the first digital instrument that people will be using in 50 years. I totally agree with that. It's like a guitar in that way.
That is powerful, and yes, that is so true and remarkable. And the way you said design earlier too, you said that like having a piece of equipment that looks super appealing and looks inviting to use. There was a time when I went like a week or 2 without using my OP1. I was doing other things, right? And then I was like, you know what, I haven't used it in a while. So I took it out the case and put it on the table, nice high table away from my daughter's reach. She does like using it sometimes and stuff, but you know, you gotta be a little
Sticky
mindful
hands,
of that,
yeah.
you know? Oh yeah, for sure. I actually have this green, like lime green colored, there's this company called Keith McMillan. They make MIDI controllers, and it's a really nice MIDI controller. It's USB-C, and it has, you know, a keyboard layout, but the keys are more like pads. And so it's really nice to use with my iPad and stuff, right? But my daughter Kayla, when she like the color of it, the fact that and I even connected it to the iPad so she can generate sounds. And anytime she sees it now, she needs to have it. So I might have to hit them up for like another, or just buy another one actually, because she's obsessed with it now.
Have to have a child unit, yeah.
Oh, 1,000%, yeah, like one that's dedicated specifically to her. What I was gonna say about the OP1, having it on the table, and then like, you know, going to sleep upstairs and then coming downstairs, and then the first thing that I see on the table, it's like the OP1 is just sitting there. It's like, okay, I need to just turn this on for a minute. I just need to like mess around with it for a couple of minutes. And that the way you talked about design, like the design makes it look nice, of course, but it also very much invites creativity and inspiration. I was
gonna say it's an
in
invitation,
a way that,
absolutely.
100%. Yep. There's so much gear like in my studio, and I'm sure yours and others. We have so many different things that it's kind of like, how do we, you know, find time to use everything? But at the end of the day, it's like whatever's is inviting you, whatever's kind of what you're feeling drawn towards in that particular season. I use my OP1 so different than I think anyone else uses theirs. Like I was just talking to someone on the phone the other day, and on the OP1 field, you know, you have eight tapes on there, so you have multiple different things that you can kind of be working on. So I'm like, all right, you know what? You've seen the stuff I did with the OB4. You see that what I'm interested in and intrigued about is the whole idea of manipulating and sort of remixing music that I like listening to, like from, you know, popular artists, etc. So I'm like, all right, what if I tried to adapt a similar methodology on the OP1 field? And what I did was I took like oldies for example, and I labeled one tape oldies, and I thought of like 4 of my favorite oldies tracks. And on each of the tracks within that tape, I like recorded I probably did a USB-C, recorded from my iPad like the actual song, and then muted it, and then went to the next track, and then recorded a different song,
like
etc.,
a DJ deck.
Exactly. And there's so much fun.
That's
and
some
just
next level usage right there.
It is so good. For so many reasons, right? You can loop by doing the loop in, loop out. I can loop certain parts. Then you could press and hold one of the 1 through 4 buttons to like to solo out a specific song or mute out, because obviously you're not having the songs play at the same time. But you can press 2 buttons together to just switch immediately to another song like midway through,
it mutes
which
one
is
and
crazy.
unmutes the other.
Yeah, yo, it is. It's mine. And then the other day, I was at this really nice like dandelion farm place with like a photo opportunity. I was doing a photo shoot there. I brought my OP1 field with me. Hopefully, if I'm not too lazy in editing this episode, I'll like put some of the pictures up. As a matter of fact, let me click this mark clip. I'm gonna do just that. But I'm sitting there with the OP1 field, and the speaker on that thing is quite incredible, I must say, compared to the original. It can get quite loud with just the speaker built in. So I'm
and
like
they're
sitting
smart.
there
They did
playing.
it in mono.
They did it on the field or in the original?
On the field, which the output is in stereo, but the speaker is mono, so it's just loud. It's just loud and strong.
Oh, see,
because you're not really listening to the imaging.
Speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. There's one speaker on there, one grill, I guess.
Yeah,
one
but
place
then
where
when
it's
you
all
plug it
coming
into
out
the
from.
OB4, you get all the width of the track.
Yeah,
you hear it all come in.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So to that point, and I want to talk about your workflow a little bit with the OP1 because I don't make music from scratch on the OP1 field currently. That's not a thing.
Interesting.
That's a thing that I want to. It is very interesting. I want to learn how to, and I want to kind of like I'm more about MIDI based sequencing. That's how I grew up. That's what I kind of use. So like recording MIDI, quantizing if needed. And then kind of switching, exploring different presets to see, oh, maybe this preset might sound different. Like that's my whole workflow. That works really well for me. So obviously that's not something you do. You're recording audio directly on here. So I'm figuring that out, right? I'm not forcing it anymore. At first I was like, lock myself in a room for a couple of hours. I'm like forcing myself to make something on here. Not anymore. Now it's
use it as an OPZ
let's just explore.
Almost,
let's just have fun. Exactly. The OPZ is what it is for a reason. So to that very point, you got the oldies track. Then I have like one that's called Khordmaster, right? And these are now 4 of my songs that I created in a similar way on each of the different tracks there. Some from the OPZ. I might do a performance from the OPZ and record it to tape, which has been like
love that.
breathtaking and so fun, right? Pitch shifted and then re-perform it, I guess, on the OP1. So there's like, I guess I say all that to say there's so many different ways to use it. So I want to know like from your end, like if you can kind of walk me through and the folks that are listening, like what is your workflow on the OP1 field? If you turn it on right now, what are you kind of doing on it?
I jump through so many different zones with it. I just finished a record. It's funny, what I call my collaborative project, but my music releases up to this point are under just my name, August Kamp, but I've always said that's the sum of me and all my friends. Like that's whatever gets into my sound. And most of my stuff, I released every album that I've released has been before I got the OP1 field. And the OP1 field is such a hi-fi output. It's almost like overindulgent. It's 32-bit through the whole signal chain. And so me who exports the master file, I do my own mastering, engineering, mixing stuff. The master file of my, what I deliver to a streaming service, I do that in 24-bit because I know that they are going to make it 24-bit, and I trust myself to do that better than I trust their algorithms to do that. And so I will make if there's a tiny bit of loss that's going to be detectable, I make sure that I approve that before I send it out. And a lot of mastering is just sort of babysitting this tiny bit of distortion, this tiny bit of loss that is like as I make my track loud enough for me to listen to it and bob my head, it starts to crunch. And I got the OP1 field, and one of the first things I discovered about it is this is my mastering rack for my last 2 albums. It's literally better than a hardware preamp. Like, there are people who would say that you have to spend $10,000 on equipment to make your stuff sound these ineffable words for loud, like things I would say like big or fluffy, where it's like if you say that to a mastering engineer, they'll be like, you have something that makes it fluffy. But if you say that to like someone who doesn't do that, they'll be like, what does fluffy even mean? And because the more you learn about loudness, the more you learn it's just not a thing. Like, loudness doesn't exist. It's a combination of illusions. And One of the ones that I didn't expect to have as much control over is this sort of texture and this sort of warmth. And I always figured that was just the price of me being the age I am and not born with analog. You know, I think that analog to me is this beautiful story I was told about how back before computers were here to help, we used to just bang rocks together until we found, you know, the chemicals that became the magnets in tape, and we stored audio in there, and it got kind of messed up from that process, and it sounded like this. And like that, like if you look at what a 90s video is, it's VHS loss. Eras are defined by the way that data was failed to be preserved. Because VHS, we get the static, and then DVD, we get, you know, like there's all these different ways that you can sort of tell what you're looking at by the loss in it. And I think the OP1 handled that, like the original OP1 handled that really cleverly by saying, okay, so it's a tape machine. We can't do ultra hi-fi. We're doing 16-bit output. Let's say let's saturate it like tape. And then the field just took that to another level because obviously you've got the 4 tape modes, right? You've got the hi-fi, the vintage, the porta, and the mini disc. But what's crazy to me about those is that each of those, Teenage Engineering has modeled a number of different types of tape in terms of their saturation, and done it so faithfully that when you record these oldies onto the OP1 field, you're probably doing a remaster on them that would rival having a professional remaster it, just because the drive and release on the output of the OP1 adds this silky smooth drive that just catches on to the tape flavor. Because, you know, with gain and loudness, it's all about gain. People throw this term around, gain staging, but what I would define that term as is who's picking up where who left off. If I push some reverb on a sound and then I distort that, it's going to sound like crunchy reverb. But if I put some distortion and then I put reverb on that, it's going to sound like washy distortion. And it's the same with different kinds of loudness. If you put this loudness on top and this loudness underneath it, you'll discover different things. And so, you know, you might discover that this makes your kick drum hit harder, but over here makes your snare go snap. And both of those are important to a track. And Teenage Engineering has taken this hybrid approach where they it seems like they modeled different types of tape for the low end versus the high end versus the mid range. And it's to the point where now when I just finished a new debut record for a project that, you know, it's not even really like announced anywhere, but I'm happy to drop the first little hint about it here. It's my first solo project. It's called the name of the band or the artist is Interface, which is one of the, I don't know if you've heard the sentence that's the word buffalo a lot of times. It basically is, it's like this linguist joke where you find a word that has a lot of meanings and then you make a sentence out of only those meanings for that word.
That's pretty cool. Okay.
And so what the interface name means is it if you switch each of the word interface for like a synonym, it would mean computer facilitate human connection, which is to say we're all interfaces. We need to interface with each other, but we need help. And I think synthesizers obviously do that. They give us a way to tell stories and to reach each other. And I was mastering this record, realizing sort of that it wasn't an August Kamp record. It was something new. It was something that, you know, I wanted to put in its own world. And I ran every single track, the actual master output file, through the tape. I recorded it all the way onto the hi-fi tape, and I recorded it all the way off of the hi-fi tape just because it makes it sound like I sent the record to a separate studio to have them put their equipment on it. Like it's so skips a lot. It's like the OP1 does this in a lot of cases, but it skips like 10 things I would do on my laptop with one very fun thing that I do on a dedicated device.
Let me jump in for a second to wrap my brain around this, because there's so much great information that you're sharing here that I for one, and maybe others, maybe others out there who own the OP1 field or who are considering it, just aren't aware of the things that you're like super aware of, which I just want to unpack a little bit. So what you just mentioned just now is you have a song that you created elsewhere, on your synths. Do you use Ableton? Do you use DAW, or what do you use for your? I
make most of my stuff in Logic as sort of the home base. Like if I'll make it in different places, and then Logic is where we get the gang together.
Gotcha. So you got Logic, you got a song that's in Logic, and what I heard you just say, because I am not as aware of the whole mixing and mastering process. Where I excel musically is give me a blank slate, give me a keyboard workstation, or Ableton, for example, and I can like create something from scratch using presets, modifying sounds, adding, like I can do that, like that step of the production. Where I don't spend a lot of time at, however, is after that original piece is created, now it's sounding like an 8 out of 10. How do we mix and master it to kind of bolster the sound to make it just sound more professional, right? That's what you're kind of talking about. So what I heard you say, just to wrap my brain around this, is you have something created, got the gang together in Logic, and it's sounding good. And you said that you then would record that directly to say the studio tape, for example, on the OP1 field, and then record it back out from the OP1 field back maybe into Logic or wherever your final destination is, and it's going to sound much better because of what's happening with that particular tape on the OP1 field.
It not only sounds better, like you're saying, it's almost magic. It's like you run it through and then you run it out, and then it's like, who was in there that took a look at my track for me? And what I notice it is that the master out, the little bus that they've got, they have a sort of a sly module for everything, and their master module has a couple, 4 settings, 4 knobs. It's got the left and right gain. I usually have my gain on the left and right both at like 32, very low, very low output, and then the drive I have at like 64. And then I have where the real magic of that section is the red knob, which is the release on the drive. And at first I was like, why are you not even giving me an attack? Like, why am I only looking at a release control? And then it sort of hit me when I was mastering this record, which is, here's what that whole module is doing. It's saying, turn your whole mix down. I'm going to play with it. I need headroom. I'm going to add some drive to really, fluff it up, give it some saturation, some flavor, ultimately distortion, but that adds some real texture that the next stage of gain can grab onto. And usually the problem, I think a lot of people have this problem when they're mixing their own drums, which is if I make it as loud as I want it crunches. And for me personally, I've had that put me off of working on music for a day, because this kick that was so silky smooth would be crunching, and I would just be like, I'm just not feeling it. But the thing that you mentioned, that 8 out of 10, how do I get it that extra mile? To me, being able to show up for an unfinished track as if it were finished, I think is one of the core points of this. And what the OP1's so good for is that it takes all the steps of a mastering process, and like Teenage Engineering does, it kind of hides those from you. And it says, you can say how much oomph you want. That's this knob. and you can say how quickly you want the oomph applied, which is this knob. But that's really all you get.
That's the drive and release.
That's the drive and release.
Respectively? Okay.
And so once I realized that release, people love to sidechain their drums. I love to sidechain my drums. It's one of these techniques that's kind of a pain to do, but when you do it, it's like, oh, that sounds good. And for those who don't know what that is I like to do the impression. The difference between, a sidechain bass with a kick drum sounds like, which is where the bass steps aside when that kick comes in, obviously. And I think a lot of people wish that they did this when they were mixing, and then they've got the master of the track, and it's like, well, I wish that kick had a little more room. And what the OP1 field can do is it can basically sidechain something you didn't sidechain. Like, if you put the whole mix through the OP1 field, but you put that release way back, like 300, then it'll say, I'll do the drums kind of quiet, but I won't just do the drum quiet, I'll do that whole moment quiet. And then after the loudest part, then I'll roll the loudness back up. And what that ends up doing is it takes everything that's not a drum and it sidechains it to the drums. And for me, I have bad hygiene when I'm working. I don't do things in the right order because I have ADD and I'm getting ideas left and right. I'm doing sort of crazy Legos. So the idea that I can go back and add some detail like that just by running it through a module on the OP1, like that took it to a new level for me where I was like, now this is my mastering unit,
Dude, that is really remarkable. And I was going to wait until after the conversation offline, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say it now. The way that you understand this piece of equipment and the way that which is one powerful thing, but maybe just as important is the way that you're able to articulate it and make it make sense. I'm the audience right now, right? Because I'm learning a lot right now. I actually had to send mine back in. I'm having a little issue, or enough of an issue that I have to send it on the headphone jack. The headphone jack does not detect the microphone when I'm using a headset anymore for some weird reason. I had to send them like a video and stuff. So they're looking at that now. Very strange. Yeah, I thought it was like a setting, but they looked at a video I sent them. So it's kind of good, right? Send it away. Now I'm like spending more time on the Z. I'm spending more time on the piano, like learning. I'm learning like some really cool classical pieces, which I'm having a amazing time with. But what's fascinating, even more so now, I'm like, another great piece of information, right, is that using, like, I have some really, really great songs that I created, say, on my Chord Gadget. I use Chord Gadget on the iPad all the time. I love that app. It's like very, very fun to use and very inspiring for me. So I can now, what you're describing is I can like make a song there, record it to a tape, to like one track in the OP1, and just spend some time on that mixing. You called it a module, right? But that section with the drive and all that, which I kind of understand, but now understand even more so, to shape the overall final sound of what was sounding good on the iPad itself, but now can make it sound, just tweak it a little bit. I'm very excited to try this out. Super helpful that you shared this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think everyone who gets to hear their own music, even just louder, I think, we have such competitive loudness standards in pop music that when we hear Travis Scott on the radio and then we hear our own stuff, a lot of us tell ourselves that it's not good because it's not as loud. And I think what I would love to see is for everybody to just not have that one as an excuse to tell themselves they're not good enough. I think that the more you can sort of give people these, no, you kind of are just as good as Travis Scott. Like, I think that when you see someone, this is part of why I master music for other people, is because the first time I saw Diego hear a track that he produced solo, but loud, it was like he was hearing it for the first time. And it was like, I think it just became almost imperative for, I like to say, you don't know if a song is done unless you've mastered it already. Because otherwise you're listening to it as if it were unfinished. I like to say a song is never unfinished. A song just gets finished multiple times. It's always done, but the best kind of song is the one that's done for the 10th time, and this is the time. Like, wow. I feel like anyone who knows a musician knows that vibe.
100%.
Don't listen to that 100%. One. Don't listen to that one. I just did a new one.
Yeah, different versions. That's so funny, and that's super true. Makes a lot of sense. Let me talk about Logic with you for a little bit. So, from a synthesis perspective, you have multiple. I'm assuming you have a few keyboard synthesizers in your studio, I would imagine.
I jump between the OP1 Field and the Mini Freak for the most part.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 portable type synthesizers that at any given moment, if you wanted to use the sounds in either of those and connect them to and record into Logic, those are easy enough to just connect and then use it for something else type thing, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I use my OP1 Field as kind of a middleman, because I like to say when I have music mode in my brain, I don't really even like to open my laptop. I think sometimes that makes my brain go, oh, I'm working. And then when I have this out, like all of my Mini Freak work, I actually record to the tape in the OP1, use that as my DAW, and then when I've got it arranged to a satisfactory place there, then I'll bring it into Logic. And honestly, the only things I really do in Logic are like AI processing, where you can have like izotope. If you don't know izotope, I would highly recommend checking out their Ozone and also their mobile app Spire. If you have a microphone that works over USB or with a TX6 when connected to an iPhone, what you can do is it uses AI to do a sound check on your voice and do a compression and a gate and various parametric EQ automatically using this algorithm that kind of checks your voice and goes, okay, this is where your resonant frequencies are, this is where, I'll dip this is where your S's are. It sets all that stuff for you so that whatever microphone you did the sound check with just sounds like a studio mic. But what's craziest is that you hear yourself mixed in real time. I don't know if you've ever tried something called a speech jammer, but it's a really trippy thing. You put on headphones and it plays your own voice as you talk, but just a little delayed. And people legitimately stop being able to talk immediately. Almost guaranteed, because hearing that just kind of turns your brain off. Like it says, there is something wrong with the way that I'm talking, and so your brain doesn't want to. And then this is the opposite. This takes that phenomenon and it almost tricks you into finding your voice. Like, I really struggle to find my voice with vocals, and then when I used this app, it was like, I like did a test note. I was like, and I was like, that's me?
Yeah.
And then you like sing a little, and it's like they already treated it. It's like they already tuned it or whatever, but there's no tuning. It's all just subtractive EQ. That stuff is what I think the future of music is, because I think people shouldn't have to know how to mix in order to be good mixers.
That's very interesting. What do they need to know? What should they need to know in order to be a good mixer?
I'm not.
Or should they not even need to be a good mixer?
I want them to care.
Okay. Yeah.
I think anyone who cares about their idea deserves to have it. And then once we have all those bases covered, then we can start moving to people who kind of care. And I think a lot of people who kind of care are just scared to care. And so once they see that everybody's getting their ideas, then I think people will start taking things off the shelf that maybe they thought they wouldn't get around to.
Wow. Very interesting. Sequencers on the OP1, do you use any? And if so, how do you use them?
The sequencers are so funny because it feels like that kid at school who, like, you're like, that kid's kind of, I haven't really talked to him. He's kind of weird. He gave me a weird look one time. And then you hang out one time and it's like, you know that kid can juggle? Like, it feels like every time I jump in on a sequencer, I'm like, I had no idea this was how you worked. But
right,
I'm here for it.
I'm down.
I haven't figured out the Etch-a-Sketch at all. No idea.
I need
how
to
use
find
that
someone
one.
who knows it. I need to find someone who uses it. I plan to go to a cafe and be like, and I was gonna like either tweet it, even though I'm not even like on Twitter like that, but like put it on Instagram or something as a story. Like, hey, I'm going to a cafe for 4 hours today, and I'm actually not even a time limit. I'm going there and I'm not leaving until I made something that sounds dope using the Etch-a-Sketch as the foundation on the open. And I plan to do that eventually because I want to. I know earlier I talked about not like forcing the issue, but I think that would be actually a fun exercise to just experiment and have fun.
Lock yourself in a room with the Etch-a-Sketch.
Literally, no windows, right? Maybe it's like dim in there. There's like some dripping stuff from like the ceiling, just like locked in there, like,
very
like the movie
dank
Saw
room.
or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, no windows. You want a window? Draw a window.
Exactly. That's what it's for, right? There you go.
It's for an incentive. No, so here's my
man.
only lead with the Etch-a-Sketch is I think it's for droning music, like ambient stuff. I think you do long horizontal lines with blips. Which is to say you're kind of probably going to draw a piano roll at the end of the day, but I've just been curious. I've always done like silly stuff with it. But then things like the tombola, I don't know if you've used the tombola very much.
For sure. A little bit.
I do ambient music. This is what I would say would be a good on-ramp to feeling really comfortable working from scratch on the OP1 field. I almost have it as my only working from scratch tool. Which, what I like to do is I'll set a chunk of loop, or even not do that, but I give myself a safety net. Something that gives me room to experiment without making something abrasive accidentally. So, two of my favorite safety nets, I like to say slow attack and low pass the heck out of it. So make it soft and make it rise. And then what I can do is I can sort of push a key. I don't know theory very well, so I sort of noodle around in F major usually. But if I push a key and then I'll listen for a second, and if I do like it, obviously keep holding it. Let that be a little arc that goes by. But then if you don't like it, just let go because it'll come in so quietly you'll be able to tell right away. And so that's, I call that a safety net. It's like something so that I know if I don't like the sound before the audience knows. The imaginary audience. But then what I like to do is I just set it looping, and I do these slow attack pads and just these little washy sounds. And the goal, again, is to lose track until you hear that first sound you made come back around. And then you have the option to either keep playing until you're done, or, you can stop there. But then I just sort of go layer by layer on top of that and let the song slowly build. And it ends up sounding a lot like water, I think. Like it sounds... I think I've always struggled to make stuff that was alive and that was moving and breathing and just sort of like an ecosystem. And then the OP1 field really taught me how, because it got this sort of looping thing going where the reverb loops, because it's the tape track, so it's not like the OPZ where it's looping data, but it's looping the actual tail of the reverb too, so you can use that in your next loop. And I think taking everything that I would have been like, oh, I recorded over myself twice or something, and like almost picking rules to break, and then giving myself some sort of safety net that makes it safe to break that. So it's like, if you want to break the rule of this and this, maybe put a low pass so that you can have it be soft when you do that. And like the DNA synthesizer on the OP1 original and the field has always bewildered me, because I always just thought it sounded like grime. And eventually I started playing with it, and the other day I found I pushed the DNA to like a really low frequency, grindy sort of low, like, you know how it sounds, like a. And then I took the filter and I brought the filter way in, the nitro filter, and I pushed the resonance up, and suddenly I was listening to crickets. Like the sound of a meadow full of crickets. It was like,
wow.
And it made me realize, like, the OP1 is just this computer that you have a conversation with, and sometimes it's the one that tells you what song you're making. Like, much more than any other synth I've ever known. It kind of feels like it's got just as much of a plan for me as I have for it.
Wow. And that's what it's all about, huh?
Yeah, it's like what you were saying at the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really cool. All right, I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm inviting you on just in the future, maybe when your next project drops or whenever you want to come back on to drop some more gems. This was like such a great time.
Yeah, no, this was wonderful. This is like one of the most like engaging and like locked in conversations I've had on these topics.
Yeah, I mean, and I appreciate everything that you shared, and this is quite remarkable. Let's talk about social media for a moment, and just your relationship with social media, with content. How is it going? Do you like social media? Do you like being able to share stuff? Is it like challenging? What's your relationship with it?
I think that we're seeing a lot of big changes in the way that people interact on a number of fronts, and social media has been kind of lagging. I think that we're still locked in this world where social media companies seem to think that they know what we want to see more than we know what we want to see. And I think in theory, social media is a very important thing to me. It's something that, like, for me to feel at peace, I think there must be things like that. There must be ways for people to talk to each other and to do show and tell. But I do also think that we will have to see some movement away from the idea of ranking people and from the idea of putting some people's creativity and expression above others. And I think that's one of the things that I honestly really anticipate and hope for AI help with, is I think human beings absolutely can recommend things to each other and to ourselves, but that it's more complicated than just here's something like the things you like. It actually requires some back and forth and really knowing your friends. You know, if you know someone who recommends something that you are gonna love, that person probably knows you really deeply. That person probably knows where you're at right now. And I think until our algorithms on social media are essentially infused with something like ChatGPT, something where they're having conversations with us, they understand instructions. Like, I want to be able to tell my YouTube algorithm, I think it's really funny when people trip and bonk their knee. I don't think it's really funny when people hurt themselves. And to have it understand what I mean with that implicit change of tone, like that type of thing, I think that is where I see the future of social media going. Is I think humans have all of this amazing art to share with each other, and we need a better daycare center for all the grown-ups.
Yeah.
because
Love that.
because right now, you know, you look at Twitter, and like I could tell even by the way you say I'm not even on Twitter like that, is like Twitter kind of rewards the hostility of challenging someone else's claim to do what they love. And I think the idea that I like about social media is that it's everybody seeing everybody else's spotlight moment. You know what I mean? Like, I think everyone who I know has something that they're brilliant at that they kind of keep to themselves. That's what I want social media to reveal to the world. But I think there are definitely some steps to go to get there, but I think characteristic for me, I'm optimistic that it can absolutely be done, and that I think it's definitely important enough that humans talk to each other that I would say it's worth working on it. You know what I mean?
If not for it, like conversations like this would be very difficult to have, and I think that's one of the things that I keep kind of falling back on with regards to one of the just great things about it, the things that I rely on to be able to meet people like yourself. And then, of course, we won't even go. Maybe that'll be a jumping off point for a next conversation. But the as a creator, right? As we talked about earlier in the conversation, just about sometimes being okay with creating for yourself and not with the main intent as, you could love something that you made and you could post it and then it doesn't get love and then you're like, oh, dang, maybe this wasn't as good. And that really sucks, right? Because it was good.
Exactly. You're at risk of losing something precious because, that person could delete that file, God forbid.
Yep.
I think it's totally about finding that balance between community and self-actualization, affirmation. Like, I think maybe even a way to sort of put a pin on it would be social media, I think, is wonderful when it facilitates that art is a community. And I think I wish for it to move more in that direction than facilitating art as a commodity.
Ladies and gentlemen, August Kamp. Damn, that's how you do the mic drop moment. I see you're holding the mic.
Yeah, so I was gonna say
you can literally drop. Yeah. There you go. Perfect. There you go. Yo, this was such an incredible conversation. Like I said,
what a great talk,
absolutely.
Man.
It was really, really, really good. And I think, a while ago when you and I first got introduced to each other on Instagram, at least, we were talking about each other's albums. And I'd listened to your album. I was in the gym. I remember that. And we had just both thoughtful. It was a really nice, we checked each other's art out. We had some just genuine feedback and vibes and positive, things to say about each other's art, which I think it really resonated with both of us. And this was just a really, really, really good conversation. I'm gonna share this directly with the TE team and hey guys,
that means a ton to me.
Yeah, they would. This is gonna mean a ton to them, I think, and it meant a ton to me. Just getting this information out there, or genuinely the way that you did it was really quite remarkable. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And then just as a parting thing and on a personal note, I am going to, that sort of secret project I was talking about with the interface name, I am going to send you the secret link to that, just so you have it.
Meaning it's done already?
Oh, yeah.
And just not released? Yeah.
Oh, I'm usually like 3 or 4 albums ahead of whatever I'm releasing.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
In terms of
cool.
what is mastered versus what's releasing now.
Got you. Okay. Well, I look forward to listening to that next time.
Yeah, it's definitely the one.
Good. This was, really, really good. Hope you have a great rest of the day. I know you're 3 hours early, right? So what is it, like 9 o'clock your time?
Yeah, I got it. Something right at the beginning of the day.
Get your day started.
Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, have a great one. All right.
Have a great one yourself. All
right. So August is your name. And it is the month that I was born. So there's a synergy here that's immediate, which I'm very, very much a big fan of.
That's so funny. It always makes me happy when people say that because I feel like they're carrying that little synergy for me because I was born in July.
Yeah.
I feel like I was one off. My parents were like, no, we still like August.
Right. We're gonna stick with this. Oh man, that's funny. Wait, what day in July? Is it like the very end of the month?
No, actually, July 5th.
Okay.
So day
cool,
after
cool.
Independence Day, yeah.
Got it. Well, you know what? This is
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead first. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, my aunt was born on the 4th of July. It looked like I was going to be born on the same day, and then I just took one extra day of my time. I was like, no, I want my own day.
Right. I'm actually not ready. Just give me 24 more hours. I'll let you guys know when I'm good.
Everybody be patient. Everybody be patient.
Sure. And what I was gonna say is we're gonna go right off of that topic